What is up, y'all, and welcome back to episode 7 of From the Interns. We're back from Auburn. Had a little bit of a break because Matthew had some stuff going on. I got hit with just that in the face with sickness during the Auburn game, actually. But we had to stay there. Had to cover the game, make sure that couldn't overcome us. So we're back. It's a little late, but we're gonna be talking about that Auburn game. Absolutely insane one. 20-10. Felt more like a 13-10 win.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those games, again, where you see Georgia down early and then they rally. And it's almost becoming habit now where Georgia finds themselves trailing early on. But, yeah, I mean, really my biggest takeaway was, and I've heard a lot of different people say this, and the biggest thing people are going to talk about is Auburn let one play define the game. And it was the obvious, whether you think it was a fumble or not on the right before the half where Jackson Arnold is diving for the goal line in the tush-push formation and fumbles. But, yeah, I mean, Hugh Freeze at the half was talking about how the team should be up by more, and he looked absolutely devastated in his interview. But, I mean, that's just one of those things where if you're a coach, I feel like you can't really let your team see you like that. I'm not sure what it looked like in the locker room, but it just felt like that was the moment for them where they almost just gave up in a way. Their offense in the second half was abysmal. Their body language was a lot different. You saw Hugh Freeze a lot less animated like he was in the first half. So, yeah, I mean, it was just – and also a lot of penalties both ways. From my view in the press box, I was right by the student section, and their students were absolutely livid from the officials. But it's just one of those things. I think regardless of where you stand on if you're a Georgia fan or an Auburn fan, it really just sucks to me to see plays and just drives decided by penalties. You'd like to see them maybe let them play a little bit more, but that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. And sometimes officials, I can think of a lot of different times. Like, first thing that came to my mind was the Texas game last year when the bottle throwing and they flipped the call. I mean, you can think of a lot of different times for both teams where penalties might have set up drives or just completely changed the game or the outcome of the game. So.
And you've got guys like Raylan Wilson, C.J. Allen. Their whole mission that entire drive there for when Auburn's at the goal line is do not let these guys cross. You have Raylan Wilson go in, punch it the first time. C.J. Allen go in, punch it the second time. I think they stick with whatever call they call on the field there. I think it was seriously that close. The angles they gave, there's none where it's truly on the pylon, so you can't actually tell. But the angle that I kept seeing and that they kept replaying, and people argue both ways with the same angle, which just shows how close it is. What I think happened is you've got it almost crossing the goal line. Raylan Wilson punches it. The ball crosses the goal line in his chest but not in his possession. And then that's when C.J. Allen comes in, punches it again, and Kyron Jones is able to pick it up. The one thing that I really don't get is how never heard a whistle. I've heard people say it was blown dead, but I think that's sort of a situation where you either give Auburn the touchdown or you give Georgia the touchdown. Kyron Jones never touched the ground with the ball. It looks like, he almost did while he was recovering it, but he never went down once he returned the ball. He ran down all the way with Dalen Everett beside him. The whole Georgia sideline thought he scored. And, like Matthew said, that's just something where it stinks to see a game that's won only be talked about with and defined by one moment. And that's something that you can't let affect you, especially as the head coach of another team.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I've heard very few Georgia fans complained about that being a touchdown for Georgia, which it probably should have been. But I just don't think a lot of people really realized what was going on because there was just so much chaos at the time. I mean, you had refs looking at each other like, what's going on? You got a Georgia player running down the other side of the field with the ball. The Georgia side, I think half the Georgia sideline was erupting all over the field. Nobody knew what was going on. And I think that may have been a little bit why they said they blew it dead, because I remember looking and there's all this pile and Georgia players taking off and all the sideline just rushes onto the field. And I'm like, did they blow it dead? Because I couldn't hear anything where I was sitting. But yeah, I mean, it's just Auburn fans are really, really, really frustrated with that call. But I think the same could be said for Georgia because at the time they're trailing by 10, and it could have been a 7-10 game at the half, which is, I mean, 3 points is a lot different than 10. So, yeah, I mean, it just shows that, I mean, sometimes fans are going to complain a little bit more, but I was kind of surprised to not see more of an outcry from Georgia fans even after the game about that.
And it's funny you talk about the Texas game. There were actually – I was on the far end zone opposite of where the fumble took place, but there were Auburn fans. I saw at least one beer bottle, one water bottle thrown onto the field, and it was instant, just police run out there and try to look for these people and stop it, of course. But, I mean, at the end of the day, Georgia gets the ball on the 1 yard line, has a great run by Josh McCray to get them out of sort of that little scary spot, where you're backed up in the end zone. Gets rid of that opportunity for Auburn's defense to get a safety. By the way, Auburn's defense has multiple guys that are going to go in the first round. It's not like Georgia's offense played against a bad defensive team at all. And then at the end of the day, you've got a targeting call against Gunnar Stockton, and you've got a roughing the passer against Gunnar Stockton, and that's something you can't do when a team's doing a 1-minute drill at the end of the first half. That's a difference maker for sure. Georgia couldn't get anything turning in the first half on offense until this drive, and that was fully an effect of Auburn's defense just making dumb mistakes. And Matthew and I were talking earlier, it was just about every throw Gunnar Stockton is throwing, he's getting nailed to the ground.
Crushed, yeah.
Not just a little push, fall back. He's literally getting destroyed. And it's, you got to respect him for playing tough through this. And Georgia had a chance to get down and score there, but obviously wasn't able to. Took the 3 points, and it was a lot different of, a halftime than it could have so easily been 17-0. But at the end of the day, if you're Jackson Arnold and Auburn, you have to hold on to the football there. That's you don't let it come down to a potentially controversial call. You let it come down to, okay, are we going to score or are we not? That's just the one thing you can't do is turn the ball over at the one. At the very least, it would have been 13-0 or 13-3. But instead, you're going into halftime only up 7, only up 1 score. And so that was a huge momentum shift. You could see just the energy in the stadium sort of get sucked out there. And, when you're Kirby Smart and you're defeating this team now 19 times in a row, it's going to be a similar effect that Georgia fans have against Alabama, where you're just like defeated. And you're going to lose the energy and you're going to get it just sucked out of you because you're just upset with – you just know the outcome and you know what's going to happen. And as soon as Auburn didn't score this touchdown, that sort of vibe was just given.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Hugh Freeze is saying we should be up by more. I think that's exactly what he said. I could be wrong, but that's from what I remember. But it's like, I think if you told an Auburn fan, if I'd walked up to an Auburn fan as I'm walking in the stadium and said, would you want to be up? Would you take being up by 10 at halftime? I think they would have all said absolutely. So I just think to complain about how big your lead is a little – I don't know. That's not how I would have approached it. I'm obviously not a head football coach, but I mean, there were 30 minutes left in that game after halftime, and they're up by 10, and they just completely folded. It's like all these other fans of other fan bases are, texting Georgia fans saying, "Hey, that's a Auburn got, the refs were terrible, and Georgia's so lucky, all this stuff," but that's just football. I mean. Sometimes officials are going to make calls and you're not going to be a fan of them, but when there's 30 minutes left in the game, that's not what lost you the game. It's the fact that in the second half you had no offense whatsoever and your defense in big moments wasn't able to make the plays. So that really should be no excuse for that loss if you're an Auburn fan or player or coach or anything. You just got to do a better job of playing 60 minutes of football instead of 30. So.
And, to that same point, it's pretty evident that Georgia is a second-half team. They're going to get knocked in the face, and they're going to take it. They're going to run through it. But it's to the point where eventually this team is going to have to start performing in the first half if they want to keep up with these contending teams. It's unfortunate to see that it's been a trend just about every game. Georgia's not able to start off how they want to, primarily defensively, it feels like. Obviously, up until the end, Georgia had about 20 offensive yards in this Auburn game. But when you've got an Auburn offense that doesn't necessarily have a reputation for putting points on the board, it's a big deal when they're able to do so, in the first half. And so for that being said, Georgia's got to figure out, I don't know, we were talking about this earlier in one of my classes. I don't know, you can't figure out what it is. You don't know if it's something just fully mental. I don't know if it's something preparation. I don't think it is, because it's obviously Kirby Smart running this team, and he's had the same preparation, if not adapted the preparation for every year he's been here. But something's got to change there for Georgia to be able to compete against these teams like Ohio State, like Miami.
It has to.
And, I guess all you can say is, once again, we were talking about after, Georgia escaped with a win, and that's how it might be nowadays with NIL and just in the SEC in general. You look at that SEC, list of teams, and there are about 14 teams that I fully am convinced could beat each other. And you have one of the top teams play a bad game, and, you've got Vanderbilt, who used to be just an absolute bottom feeder, and they're going to go in and win these sort of games now.
They're favored against LSU.
And exactly. They're favored against LSU. No one would ever expect that to happen. So it's just it's a crazy time, and that was a crazy first half. But obviously Georgia came out, and I just want to say one thing. Just Zachariah Branch is, on these RPO plays has just been so incredibly reliable in getting the ball, and when he gets the ball, getting upfield and making plays. He's been a guy that has been able to consistently catch these tough slant route, balls just right over the middle, gets the fourth down conversions or whatever when you need them, gets the third down conversions. He's just been a go-to guy for that kind of play. And I think him and Colby Young just continue to make a huge impact on this team.
And I think, I on the notes for the game, I didn't even think to put this down, but the whole clapping thing, I think we should talk about that a little bit. I mean, that's one of the crazier things I've ever seen in terms of just, I thought he called timeout. I'm going to be completely honest. And I've seen clips where there's an Auburn player in the secondary clapping, and then you see Kirby run up right after it. But in my eyes, he's doing this and not this. But I don't know. But the one thing I was going to go with this is that that's another thing. I've heard all these Auburn fans and just people that don't really like Georgia that much complain about that. But I think it was the very next play, Georgia throws I think it was a little pass to Colby Young, and he goes all the way down to the one, gets tackled, and then Georgia gets called for a blindside block. That was just not a blindside block in my eyes. So, you take that away, and that's Georgia scores a touchdown, and I think that was a drive where they missed a field goal, maybe?
I want to say, it was.
So it's just like, and even if Georgia doesn't get the timeout there or does, that has no impact. You got to go to the next play if you're Auburn. You can't let stuff like that. And I think Georgia getting down to the one was a result of Auburn being like, well, we just got another call go bad. Hugh Freeze is standing on the sidelines with his hands on his head, complaining about it. It's like you got to have that next play mentality. And honestly, if you think about Georgia, and this is a bigger, broader thing on the game, but Georgia gets knocked in the face every single game this year, and what happens? They come back and they win. They don't feel sorry for themselves. They don't say, this should have gone our way. There's no should have. It's we're going to fix it ourselves because we know that we're good enough to do it. Whereas what you saw from Auburn throughout the game is that they let stuff define themselves that they had no control over, and they let outside people and just, some things that maybe not go their way just completely dictate the way they looked at that game. So that's just – honestly, it's a complete failure, I think, on Hugh Freeze, and honestly, that might have cost him his job losing that game, and I think he kind of knew it, if you could maybe tell after that game. So
you go back to watching the film, you clearly see the Auburn defensive, I think it was a safety, like you said, just clapping, and you see Kirby run up to the ref. He says, you can read his lips, he says, he's clapping. Then you've got the play clock down to about 2 seconds. Georgia is nowhere near, getting it snapped. It looks like Kirby said, they could have gotten it off whenever he was talking about it in the postgame. But just from an outside perspective, it didn't look like the team was ready to snap the ball. He gestures for what looks like a timeout. And just what I see is he did call a timeout. He regretted it. But whenever anyone asked anything about that, he never said, I didn't call a timeout. Yeah. He never lied, as people are slandering him on the internet for. He never said, I didn't call a timeout. He literally just said, he's clapping. I talked to the refs before the game. If he's clapping, you can't do that. That's a flag. So then he went, talked to the ref about that. Georgia got no timeout called, no loss of down. And, Auburn fans can be as mad as they want about that, but at the end of the day, Georgia got a missed field goal out of it, and you can cry all you want, but sorry, it happened. And that's just the biggest thing I've seen is how people constantly keep saying he's a terrible, he doesn't represent a college football team doing this. That's insane. It just doesn't make any sense because he never is seen saying, oh, I didn't call a timeout. There's a clip of John Gruden where he's like, I had plenty of times where I called a timeout and the ref said, are you sure you want to take that? And I said, actually, no, I don't want to. And so if that happens with a former NFL coach, John Gruden, so be it. The timeout didn't matter at all. Nothing came from it. If, Georgia still ended with 2 timeouts in the game, and it seriously had no impact on the game. So I think that's far less big of an event than the fumble call. You can't complain that much about the timeout. You can be mad if you're an Auburn fan because somehow that could have analytically changed something. Somehow Georgia played or, after that. But at the end of the day, looking back on it, hindsight's 2020, it meant nothing.
It's 2 moments in a 60-minute game that they let completely change their whole outcome. And I remember saying on the podcast last week that I think Auburn they're not a bad football team. They've got a lot of good players on that team. And I don't know. I completely blame that on Auburn coaching. If you're an Auburn fan and you're frustrated, I'm sorry. I think the whole blame has to go on Freeze and his staff for just the focus of the players. There wasn't much like, it's all right, let's just rally up, we're good, we're winning. Because I think at both points they were either winning or tied. You just cannot let those moments completely dictate your game. Like, if you think back to the Georgia-Tennessee game when Georgia's just getting bombs dropped all over them from deep balls from Tennessee, and did they just stop playing the game and just go to the locker room and cry about their lead? No. They went out there, they made adjustments, and they won the game. So you cannot let those moments like that dictate the game. And, it is frustrating. Like I've said a million times, refs calling games and deciding games can be frustrating, but you just have to go about it with your business and know that your game plan and the way that you do things is good enough to win. And if you don't think like that, you're not going to win. And that showed with Hugh Freeze and the Tigers. So,
And, you mentioned that drive resulted in a missed field goal. Peyton Woodring, that was his first miss in a very long time. He made a 53-yarder earlier. This one was a 45-yarder. He missed it. And I'm going to go back to what you were talking about, the Cash Jones blindside block they called. I've seen people rewatch it and say it was a blindside block, but having very little football playing experience, what a blindside block is, but this is just something where the defender is looking at Gunner the entire way. He turns his chest at the last second while Cash thinks Gunner's behind him tucked, and I just think it's sort of a bang-bang where yes, you can argue it's blindside because the defender is turned the other way, so he's defenseless. But I think it was so quick that, once again, I think that's another one that can go either way. And Georgia would have had the ball at the 1. But I just don't see how the defender turning that lately and then getting hit once the ball is released. And I just think it's a clean block. It's not like he absolutely obliterated him or anything. He just sort of took him out of the play. And so that's enough of that. That's really the only big Georgia call that didn't go Georgia's way.
Yeah, also I think if I remember correctly, that block was also way behind the ball. Like the ball had been it just got past him, then a little bit, and then the block, and then they throw a flag, and the Auburn player lays there like he's injured, of course. But yeah, look, Georgia won the game, and there's just nothing you can do. And obviously, Georgia has to move on because they've got a big game coming up with Ole Miss, which we'll touch on a little bit more in a little bit. But
one more thing, just absolutely electric for Gunner Stockton to hit a Superman dive in front of Cam Newton during his retirement game. or his jersey retirement game. It was just, I mean, you see Gunnar rolling around the side, dives, Oscar Delp comes up to him, hits the Superman dab, and Cam's seeing all of that, just like, oh my gosh. But such a great guy. He did a press conference before the game with the media, and it was just so cool to be a little bit of a fan there for a moment, because this is a guy that's like, yes, you've got Matt Ryan, grew up near Atlanta. I'm a Falcons fan, of course, but then you've got the guy who is our childhood quarterback right in front of you, and he just seems like a genuine dude. And it was just really cool. They put on an absolute show for that retirement ceremony and for him in general. He's super friendly to the media, super, supportive of, bringing his family around and all of that, jumping in the student section, supporting all of them, supporting the current team. I think it's just a really cool thing that Auburn does over there, and that just shows what that program means to him, and that, he's willing to go back. And of course he's getting honored in this game, but he's always there just supporting. And I think that's a very cool thing to recognize for sure. But that about does it for Georgia over Auburn. One more thing, pizza performance of the week. This is one that it's a trickier one, but we had a buddy reach out. We try not to get, our opinions swayed by anyone, but, I had a buddy reach out and say, right after the game, he's saying, that's got to be a sausage mushroom pizza. And I couldn't agree more, because sausage is something that, it's so great. You love sausage on your pizza. Most people do, at least. And then mushrooms, something that's sort of, it's there, doesn't really have the texture that everyone loves. Some people like it just because, it's mushroom, it's healthy. It goes back to just the overall outcome of the game. Georgia, second half, absolute just sausage team. Pause. Sausage team, Georgia. First half, it's kind of a mushroom team. It's a little slippery. You're making your mistakes, but it's okay. You're not, losing bad enough. And so I think that's why you put those two together, and you've just got the 20-10 win that Georgia escaped with.
Yeah, so just a little bit across football this weekend. I think the biggest thing that I saw, which I only got to watch a little bit of this game, was the Indiana upset over Oregon. It seems like Indiana is one of the top teams in college football, whether people want to agree or not. I mean, that's a good Oregon team. I mean, they're coached well by Lanning. But yeah, it just seems like Cignetti's really got what he's got going over there well, and the quarterback up there is pretty solid. But yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be them and Ohio State battling it out in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship. I believe it's in Indianapolis, but yeah, I mean, that's just, it's one of those things, and that's a big thing you were talking about earlier. It's like NIL, like Indiana, they're a basketball state, they're a basketball school, but you get a good head coach and you get a good quarterback in the transfer portal, and you can win as many games as you want to. And that's showing big time there. Also, Penn State losing to Northwestern, dropping their third straight game, and what a lot of people have thought maybe could be well overdue is James Franklin. But one thing I want to say about that is I've seen a lot of people coming out saying really good things about James Franklin, which I think is fair. What he did for Penn State, I think, was really, really good. Did they really win a lot of big games? No, but I mean, they were always there. They were always at the top of the rankings, and I've seen, from different people across media saying that he was always really friendly with them and just a really good coach. But if you want
to, I'm just hesitant, as yes, James Franklin could never win the big game at that school, but when you're building a program, you're the number 2 team in the preseason. You were one play away from making the national championship last year. And you're coming off of, you lost to Oregon in overtime, and then you lose 2 games. You can't. I get it. I understand that. I understand being frustrated. But once again, it comes back to, are you running to something, or are you running from something?
You could say it,
And the coaches that I see listed that are potential hires for Penn State are just guys that I don't.
It's a downgrade. To be honest, it's a downgrade.
Exactly. I agree. It's a downgrade. You've already got I saw there's a number 1 running back for 2027 decommitted from Penn State, said he had a good bond with Coach Franklin. That's just something that he's recruited all of these classes, had all of this elite talent, and you're replacing him with guys like maybe Matt Rule. Matt Rule went to Penn State, and he's just a guy who's truly had no high level success. He hasn't won
anywhere he's gone either.
No.
So it's not really like,
you know, he did great at Baylor a few years ago, but since then, I mean, he's done solid at Nebraska, but I just don't know if I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm curious what Penn State fans think, because, you know, I'm sure I'd be sick of it too. If we every time we obliterate these bad teams, a good team comes in and we just lose randomly out of nowhere, it feels like. And, you know, but again, I think it's something that I don't know if this is necessarily the right idea, especially in the middle of the season. It's kind of tricky. And with Aller out, I guess him going out might make it easier for a coach to take over and have a new leader, because he's going to be done there. But it's just a crazy situation.
Well, also another thing, I'm sitting here trying to think about it, or if anybody may know, the last time a coach made it to the college football Final Four and then got fired the next year. I mean, that rarely. I mean, that's just if you take it back on a grand scheme of things. I mean, that was probably the best year he's had at Penn State, and then loses a bad game or two and gets fired.
I mean, the only close example I can think of is Dan Mullen
going to the SEC.
Recently after, you know, whenever Pitts and oh my gosh, who all was there?
Trask.
Pitts, Trask, and Kadarius Toney were there. He got fired soon after, but I don't think it wasn't the season after they went to the SEC championship, and that's really the closest example I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, was he a good coach? Yes. Did he put Penn State to where they needed to be? Yes. But in terms of what they really wanted, which is national championships, like they've seen Michigan and Ohio State win national championships right in front of their face. But yeah, I think that's enough about Coach Franklin. But one last thing, he's not done coaching. He's going to go somewhere to probably another lesser Big Ten or ACC or something, and he's going to get them pretty good. So,
and I saw something about that where if he doesn't end up taking a coaching job somewhere else, it affects his buyout somehow. I don't know what the exact stat line was, but he has to. I think he has to have at least a certain amount on his next contract, or it affects his buyout contract somehow.
Yeah.
And so obviously he's gonna want to take a job somewhere else, and I think he will. And it seems like he's not done with football at all.
Oh, definitely not. And kind of just along those lines, we'll jump out a little bit, but I saw a rumor today. I'm not completely sure if this is true or not, but apparently the Florida athletic director has met with boosters, and if that's regarding Napier or not, I'm not really sure. But that's another example of a coach where you're just not really seeing the level of success they're looking for. There's been flashes of it here and there, like they'll win a big game. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. And I think the report said like maybe by the end of this weekend he could be fired. I'm not really sure how true that is. There's always rumors like that. But it's just something to keep an eye on because, I mean, you're talking about your buddy, a Florida fan. If you want to touch a little bit on that, maybe if he said anything. But, I mean, it's just one of those things, you know, coaching is tough. And if you don't win games, you're just going to get fired if you want to maybe.
Yeah, so, I mean, my buddy is still hard. He's hard struck on he wants Napier gone. And he thinks that it's sort of a thing where Billy's been able to win just the right, not even the right number of games, but the right games to keep his job.
Right.
Like that win over Texas obviously is huge, and then you go back and you lose to Texas A&M this weekend. And not to knock on A&M, but it's just something that I do see where Florida fans are coming from fully.
Yeah.
In the state of Florida, you've got to be able to at least have some of the best players on the field. The state of Florida as a whole for high school football is one of the best in the nation, top 3. And it's tricky when you've got that success. You see FSU hasn't had the same, continued success this season, but beat Alabama at the beginning of the season. Miami is one of the top teams in the country, and just the way that other Florida teams are sort of making that jump, I understand why they are looking for other options.
Also, I mean, you talk about others like Florida State. I mean, Norvell, like I feel like this James Franklin fire might start a little bit of a ripple effect just because you're seeing these big coaches get fired for just being unsuccessful. But this has a chance to be a really interesting offseason. And I'll touch a little bit about this a little bit more with Ole Miss talk in a minute, but I mean Lane Kiffin's one of the hottest coaches in the league, so maybe he'll take one of these openings because his name always opens up anytime a big job comes.
Mm-hmm.
But also, Alabama defeats Missouri. That was actually a pretty good game if you watched it. Alabama had their chances to kind of run away with it, but Missouri hung in there. I mean, I think Missouri's a pretty good team, but Alabama, they're just a little bit better. And
it was very impressive to see the amount of pressure that Missouri's defensive line put on Alabama's offensive line.
As a Georgia fan, watching that, it was probably pretty embarrassing to see. But definitely.
And then you've got USC defeating Michigan. I think it was 31-10, 31-13.
Yeah.
And that was a game that the spread before the game was super close, and obviously the outcome of the game was not at all. Yeah, I feel like Lincoln Riley just kind of consistently gets these sort of heavy wins. And so that's really about it with across football this past season, or this past weekend, I should say. And with that being said, we've got Ole Miss coming up this weekend, 3:30. Game day is going to be in Athens. It's going to be a fun one.
Yep.
I think a 3:30 game is kind of needed now.
It's perfect. Yeah, it is.
Really just the night environment was great in Auburn. Noon games kind of stink. You've got a perfect amount of time to prepare for this game in the morning and get that energy right. Kirby was talking about he needs that energy, and he was very evident that he needs Sanford to be just roaring.
Well, look, I mean, and people are always saying like, oh, night games are the loudest and all that stuff, but the two games I can think that were the loudest in recent memory was the Tennessee game that everybody knows about, and then that Arkansas game. It may have been that same year.
Both were 3:30s.
I think Arkansas was noon.
Really?
It was a noon kick.
Yeah.
I remember, I think game day was on the bridge out front of Tate, like doing it or something like that. So it's like night games are crazy and all that, and it's cool. They do a light show and all that stuff, and that's great. But I love a 3:30 kick. Like the SEC CBS back when that was a thing, that was always my favorite time to play. Yep. It just really felt like, with a night game, I feel like there's all sorts of stuff going on. But I feel like everybody, at a tailgate across the country is either coming out of their noon game and is going to watch your game, or they're going to watch your game for preparation for their 7:30 kick. So I think 3:30 is perfect. And I'm getting kind of tired of the night games. I know that's kind of like a whatever thing to say, but I think it's time for a good 3:30 kick in Athens and just see what the Dogs
You don't get to sit there and think about it all day.
Right.
You get to have just enough time to get up, get ready, prepare yourself, have a little bit of fun before without sitting there for those extra 4 hours until your game starts. And I think Sanford's going to be rocking. I think it's just chip on the shoulder, lost a game. Kirby calls you out a little bit, and it's like, okay, let's do something about this.
It's a rejuvenated
this team beat you last year, which Raylan Wilson was asked about the other day. And, these players that played in that game last year, they have a chip on their shoulder. The fan base, you can say, has a chip on its shoulder, whether it's for the lack of noise against Alabama or, again, going back to the fact that this team kind of demolished you last year.
Yeah.
And like you said, Lane Kiffin has been one of the hottest coaches in the sport. He's always a name that's mentioned for these other jobs. And so it'll be interesting to see how he sort of approaches this game, because obviously he's a great coach, but there's a lot of, talk about him potentially looking at other roles. So we'll see if that brings any sort of distraction at all.
And it's just, I mean, when you think about SEC coaches, it's like you got Kirby Smart, and then who's the other big coach that's doing a lot? And I feel like if Lane Kiffin can win this game, it puts him even closer to Kirby Smart, not in terms of like, all-time coaching national titles and stuff, but just where we are right now. If Lane Kiffin can go into Athens and say, we're going to win this game, we feel like we have a better which they're going to say all these things, but we have a better team, a better roster, and we're going to go into Athens and win this game. And if they're successful in that, I mean, you have no choice but to take Ole Miss extremely seriously, which I think you should them regardless anyways. But, I mean, it's just one of those things. Ole Miss is always right there the last few years that they'll get a big win, and then they'll take like 2 steps back. They got that big win against LSU a couple weeks ago. This is their chance to not take those steps back like we've seen in the last few years. And just really, I mean, like I wrote down, Lane Kiffin has a chance to just take over college football and continue to be probably the hottest coach in football right now in terms of social media and just everything he's doing for the brand down there in Oxford.
And they tried to sort of leaned back last week.
They
It was
did. That's
a
true.
24-21 win over Washington State in a game that I think they were favored by over 20. And so they might have tripped a little bit, stumbled off the back, but they caught themselves. Obviously got the win.
I think there's a lot of Georgia film that week. If I had to
if you had to guess, it's okay. We're gonna win this game. It might not be pretty, whatever. They know they're gonna win this game. But now you're going into Athens in a game that you haven't won in Athens in 29 years, which was just a crazy stat to see.
Yeah.
You know, you sort of realize Georgia's been dominating over Ole Miss for many years, but 29 years, that's a substantial time period for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the most telling fact, not to get super Vegas-y, but Vegas has this line at 7.5. And if you told me that, 2 weeks ago, I'd be like, okay, Georgia's probably going to be a 3.5, 2.5 point favorite in this game. Something about that, Vegas knows. They know why to set these lines. It's going to bait so many people into taking Ole Miss to cover that spread because of the history of how many points they put up. And I seriously think this is a game that Georgia wins by 10 and Vegas just steals the entire public's money. I think people are going to be riding all the way with Ole Miss, whether it's their money line or their spread. I think Georgia wins by at least 8. And I'm going to be so honest, not my full analysis, but a lot of that analysis comes from the fact that how Vegas plays these games.
Yeah.
And they know exactly what line they're setting. They're not dumb. And something about that, I would be less confident in Georgia. Obviously, if they're a 2.5 point favorite, but I'm even more confident that Georgia now covers this line.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like I kind of interrupted you a little bit, but I was like, they're not dumb. I mean, they know the line they're setting. There's a reason that they think Georgia wins by, 10 plus. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And I mean, just a little bit more about Ole Miss. Their quarterback Chambliss has done a pretty good job of filling in for Austin Simmons. I remember when Simmons went down, and I was like, man, I think Ole Miss, that might kind of be it. I mean, because I think Simmons was the one that came in last year when Dawg got banged up against Georgia and just absolutely took over and piece of the Georgia defense. But yeah, I mean, he's done a good job. I mean, he's pretty similar play style. I haven't really watched a lot of Ole Miss, but I think him and Simmons have a similar play style where they like to get out of the pocket, use their legs, and find explosive plays downfield. Which, again, Georgia has another running quarterback that they're going to have to play, which is going to be the case in literally every game they play, except I'm not really sure about Charlotte's quarterback or really Mississippi State for that matter. But, again, it's going to be interesting to see how Georgia does. Going back a little bit to Auburn, I thought they did a pretty good job with Arnold. Mm-hmm. I mean, he didn't really break out as many runs as I thought he was.
He had that one big breakout for the touchdown.
Yeah. But I remember saying on the podcast last week, I literally said he has a chance to have a field day, which I thought was a pretty decent take. But Georgia did a good job of containing him, so hopefully similar with that this week with another running quarterback. But
and that's going to bring us right into the locks of the week. I'm proud to announce it wasn't unlocked last week. Last episode, I was right on my first game of the entire season since we've been recording this. I'm now 1-8-1. Had Alabama to cover 2.5 over Missouri. They covered by 0.5 point. Absolutely huge. And then had South Carolina to cover against LSU, and they tied. So we'll take that win where we can get it. This week, I'm going with 2 underdogs. And, the spreads are close enough to where I think you, honestly, if you're going to pick this game, you just pick the team to win straight up. I've got Penn State plus 2.5. I think this is a team that, they're playing Iowa. Their coach just got fired. They're going to have an interim. And for some reason, these teams always find a way to win with these interim coaches. I think Penn State is very talented. Obviously, Drew Aller went down, but for some reason, I've just got that gut feeling. And honestly, gut is better than analysis. It feels like 90% of the time on these picks. So I'm going with Penn State plus 2.5 / Penn State to win the game over Iowa. And then I'm going with Auburn, the team we faced last week. We've seen what they can do. We've seen how good their defense is, and I just don't see them losing another night home game. I think they're due. I think their scheme, their offensive line is weak. Missouri's defensive line is strong, but I think they're due. I think they're going to win this game as well. And I just don't know if I think this seriously is a Hugh Freeze. You lose this game, it might be time to see you.
Yeah, maybe they'll hire new refs for that game. Might go a little bit better for them. But
Yep.
I've got Georgia Tech over Duke. It's a even money line pretty much. It's 1.5, but it'll probably be even by kickoff. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm not the biggest Tech fan in the world. They're one of my least favorite teams in college football, actually. But you got to give a lot of credit to Brent Key. They've got a really good team, and I don't know. This is one of those games for them where, obviously, by Vegas, they're a little bit slightly underdogs, so I think a lot of people in the public are maybe thinking that this is the game that Tech wins. But I don't know. I just kind of, my gut feeling is saying that Georgia Tech's going to find a way to win. Do I think they drop a game before Georgia? Yes, but I don't think this is the one. And I think they'll go into Duke and they'll win another one of those close games like we saw against Wake Forest, but it'll be one of those things. I think the slightly better team comes out on top, so I'll take Georgia Tech there. And then also, this was the one I immediately saw when I first started looking at the lines, but I think Kentucky plus 12.5 over Texas is a pretty good line. I mean, that just screams trap game. I mean, Kentucky, as Georgia's seen in the past a lot, is a really hard place to play for whatever reason. And this is another thing where I think Stoops kind of is maybe playing for his job a little bit too. I think they've not played as well recently as they've seen in the past. So I think Kentucky keeps this relatively close. So I think 12.5 is a pretty safe line. I think this will be like a 20-13 or like a 28-17 kind of game, low scoring, something like that, where Texas might win by 10 or 8 or something, but they'll ultimately win. But don't be surprised if that game is somewhat close and, in a crazy world, Kentucky might win that game. So
yeah, I think that about does it for episode 7 of From the Interns. We really appreciate you watching. One more time, we wanted to mention, we haven't mentioned it yet this episode, we're going to be giving away 3 Onward Reserve polos at 500 subscribers. So make sure to subscribe, drop a like, comment your Instagram handle to enter. We really appreciate it if you made it this far. Thank you again. Check out our socials below. And y'all have a good one. Go Dogs.
Yeah, one last thing, and I'll say Go Dogs in that. But drop y'all score predictions because I'm honestly don't know what everybody's thinking about this game because, I mean, the line's 8.5, but I've also heard a lot of people say that they think Ole Miss is going to win. So y'all just drop your score predictions. But, yeah, be loud this weekend, and let's go get it done. Go Dogs.
All right, Go Dogs.